Hello, and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And we're talking about Antz today.
Yes.
Which I've wanted to watch ever since we watched Bug a few months ago, because you thought we were watching Antz.
Yes.
At the time, and then it turned out to be something completely different.
Yes.
So I thought, well, we should actually watch Antz at some point, because I really like this film, and I've watched it a lot over the years, although not in many years.
I haven't seen it since it came out, and one of the things that makes you feel really, really old is to realize the film is 22 years old. There are 22-year-olds who weren't born when this film came out. That's how long ago it was.
Yeah. This was the second full-length feature 3D animation after Toy Story in 1995. And there was a bitter sort of public feud in the production of Antz between Dreamworks, this is a Dreamworks film. Dreamworks had just recently been created in 1994.
I remember DreamWorks being created, yes.
Yeah, so Jeffrey Katzenberg kind of fell out with Michael Eisner of Disney, left Disney under this feud, created DreamWorks, and basically said, we're going to destroy Disney. And this film really seemed to be kind of like his pawn, in the affair. So it was being made while Disney Pixar was making A Bug's Life. And in so many ways, the films are similar. I mean, they're about ant colonies, and a single ant who's kind of an oddball outcast falls in love with a princess, saves the society, all that kind of stuff. There are big similarities between them. A Bug's Life was more successful at the box office, made I think about twice the money, though this made good money as well. So they were both successful. This came out a couple of months before A Bug's Life in the US, and I think that was one of the things, like Katzenberg was, this has to come out first. I've always remembered liking Antz a lot more. I've seen it a lot more. I think I've seen A Bug's Life through only once. This always really appealed to me, and so much of it is Woody Allen's responsibility. It's his casting, his performance, his writing.
He's the movie.
Yeah. When I say his writing, I mean the writing for his character, although I was just reading about it and found out that he made uncredited rewrites to his character, which makes sense because the character was written for his voice.
Yeah. And the whole beginning, it not only references his voice, but his persona, Manhattan, specific films. I mean... Yeah,
it starts off on the psychiatrist's couch with him playing Z, a worker ant. I mean, just the idea of Woody Allen as a worker ant is a great idea. It's like there's a single line for a film. Brilliant, And he's...
also, isn't he one in real life? I mean, that's his persona, always working. Scheduled, right? Churning out one film a year, no matter how his personal life is going.
But it really fits his kind of neurotic, sort of persona. So at the start of the film, he's talking to a psychiatrist, and he's saying, "I just feel so insignificant." And the psychiatrist says, "We've made a breakthrough. You are insignificant." Sets up the whole thing. And then this kind of this sort of vaguely. Animal Farm kind of social critique emerges, where the ant society is three classes, I suppose. There's the workers, there's the soldiers, and then there's the upper class above them, the princess and the general who preside over the entire society. And these questions of individual thought. So Z kind of falls in love with the princess one day when he meets her. She's been exercising some individual thought of her own because she goes down to the bar wanting something different in her life, wanting to slum it with the workers.
I mean, those things are all kind of cliche-ish, and there isn't really a critique of anything in the film. I mean, there's kind of one of those faux critiques where you push a little but not too much.
Everyone comes together quite happily in the end.
Yeah, I mean, I think the film is interesting to me for two reasons, really. One, it's for adults, right? And it's very smart and witty, and it really is for adults, not only in terms of the one-liners, the situations, the senior psychiatrist and stuff like that. I mean, what the children make of that. So it's quite sophisticated jokes, I think, about sophisticated people. And then the way that it's visualized, which actually, I think, I thought one of the interesting things was Woody Allen, the Ant, has more complex facial reactions than Woody Allen, the actor. You know, and he gets humor. They get humor from the Ant's face that actually you almost never get from, Woody Allen's own face. Yeah, like.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Some of the animation, I think, you can really tell how much it's moved on. And as you say, this is 22 years ago. Animation's come a long way. I mean, I was noticing the lip sync and the movements of the mouths. They were very kind of stilted and things, or stiff is probably a better word. And there are certain times where, obviously the rendering is missing so many details that you would see today, that actually some shots in here look like kind of what you'd have as previs these days, kind of like early renders as tests before you finish the film. That's how much things have changed. But there's also some incredibly beautiful shots. And what I really remarked upon to myself was the composition of shots. I think it's a really artfully and carefully composed film in so many ways, and I think there's a couple of action scenes. Well, there's like the dance scene early on, which I think was wonderful, because it's this kind of improvised, like it's not like a dance routine, it's just Z and the princess kind of being a bit free in amongst this kind of regimented grid of line dancing kind of thing. And you get these shots where it's like it's the two of them dancing next to each other, inventing something, and it's everything about the shot is kind of geometrically perfect, apart from those two. And it expresses how different they are and how liberated they're kind of feeling. There's the action scene where they go to war with the termites, which what I'd always remembered about the film was the vast shots of the army of ants. I remember seeing nothing like that in A Bug's Life. I don't remember ever getting the feeling of like the scale of the colony in The Bug's Life that you do here, I think. I always remember those shots, but one I'd forgotten is when they actually enter the termites' sort of lair, nest, whatever it is, and there's no one there, and then the termites come out of the walls. How creepy that is! I mean, you're right to say this. Like, it's definitely a kids' film because it's animated, and it's for kids, but it's dark in ways that Pixar never is.
Well, when I was saying that it was for kids, I actually wasn't referring to the darkness. I was referring to a lot of the pleasures in the film, for example, require you to know who Sylvester Stallone is.
Sure.
You know? I mean, just the ability to recognize the voices, right? Or some of the responses, right? So there's star casting, but actually you expect the audience to recognize the casting and to value the casting and for the casting to be used expressively and humorously and so on, which it is. You don't expect kids to get all that stuff, right?
No.
They don't. So actually there's a sense in which, this film is definitely made for adults. Now, it may also be made for kids, yeah, that I'm less sure of, but it is definitely made with adults in mind in a way that other animated films aren't.
I think one of the things that started when Toy Story came out in 95, that was when I first really got the sense of people saying, oh, it's a film that you take your kids to, but you sit there and watch it yourself.
Yes.
Like, I don't think, even though that may be true of many films before that, I don't think people really said that about a certain kind of film until Toy Story began. It seemed to be Pixar's thing.
I don't know. I always imagined that parents watch Disney films with their kids, and that the films are made for the kids, but with the idea that parents are going to watch at least, a couple of times with them, right? But the balance of all of that in this film was different. I mean, the film begins with a Manhattan skyline, right? With, a reference to Woody Allen's own films. The dialogue is so sophisticated. Yeah, he's seeing his psychiatrist. The image of him on the couch. I mean, what's a kid going to make about any of that?
Yeah, I know.
It's like asking a kid to understand the New Yorker cartoon. They just won't. I mean, I didn't, right? So I think that this film is working on a different level, yeah, or has a different audience in mind, or it's pitched differently, yeah. There's something. It's almost too sophisticated for kids. It's a different type of humor. It's a very verbal humor, a lot of it, yeah, which requires you recognizing that wordplay, which you don't expect a kid to do that.
No. I mean, I must say, I would have been 10 when this came out, 10 or 11. It would have come out in the start of 99 here, I guess. so I'd have been 11 years old. I don't remember seeing it at the cinema, but I remember watching it on home video a lot, and that would have been when I was an early teen, I guess. So that's when I would be starting to really appreciate that kind of humour. Maybe that's when I would have started to appreciate New Yorker cartoons as well, if I'd read The New Yorker at that age. Maybe I thought I was smart. I mean, I don't know, because, how much of it did I get? I'm sure I knew who Woody Allen was, and I'm sure I'd seen Sylvester Stallone films and things. But how much of it really spoke to... I don't know.
I don't know. It's an interesting thing to wonder about, because I definitely remember, that watching films as a child, for example, I loved the sophistication of, screwball comedy, or a lot of screwball comedy anyway. Did I get all the jokes? Probably not, right? But there were other levels in which you could enjoy it, or which a child could enjoy it. Now, I'm not sure of that in relation to this film, yeah?
Yeah.
I'm not sure what a child would get out of it, though clearly they did. Though actually it's also significant, because this isn't a children's perennial favorite.
No.
Right, the way that some of the other Pixar animated films are, or Disney animated films are, yeah? This hasn't had that kind of child life. You never hear about this film being central to someone's childhood, the way you hear about Beauty and the Beast, or, any of those. So that's interesting.
Yeah, DreamWorks has always had the reputation of being second to Pixar. Pixar is the king of 3D animation and makes the best. There was a joke at the Oscars 10 years ago. I remember Jack Black and Jennifer Aniston were presenting Best Animated Feature, and Jack Black was in Kung Fu Panda, which was DreamWorks, and they had some bit of banter about at the Oscars every year. So I'm always guaranteed to win at the Oscars every year, Jack Black says, and Jennifer Aniston says, "How do you mean?" And he goes, "I star in a DreamWorks film, and then I take the money I make and I put it on Pixar." So Pixar always wins. Pixar always wins, and they have the huge reputation, and they own this kind of animation, that sort of the thing. And you do feel like in Antz, the balance that Pixar strikes, that thing of, it's for kids, but there's loads of jokes for the adults as well, is not the same. Actually, all the jokes are for the adults. And there's mildly sexual humour, and there's innuendo, and I do think as well, outside of the humour, there's some real darkness in that war scene. In fact, and it's a combination, where Barbados, the soldier that Z sort of makes friends with, dies, and it's just his head, and he says, "I can't feel my legs," and it's that's quite a dark joke for a kid. And it's kind of a creepy image, just this head talking.
Yes. But as I said, maybe, that's not to either praise the film or criticize it, just to point out that those things are there. Yeah, and that they are aiming at a sophistication, which is not to say that they're also not aiming at children, because actually that I make me think, how would I know that? How would I get that? Aside from, it's a princess and it's a love story, and in fact, nothing truly horrible happens. That incident that you mentioned is probably the worst one.
Probably, yeah.
But
it's interesting that, when you say about, it's a princess, that's a kiddie thing, stuff, and that's true, but all the way it's treated kind of undercuts what's aimed at kids about it. There's always some comment from Z that's sarcastic and points to kind of social relations or something like that. It's that's something for adults to get. It's not something that kids would get. So it doesn't kind of play so heavily into the kind of childhood movie tropes. I guess it likes to step back from them a bit and undercut them all the time. That's Woody Allen's entire persona, really, just standing back and throwing spitballs and making a comment, and it's exactly what his character does here all the time. And then when they get out into the sort of adventure looking for Insectopia, I think this is stuff that I did really like when I was a kid, and I remember really liking when they get to the land of red and white, which is what they've been told about, this fabled land. Turns out it's a picnic mat, and there's just these cans of Pepsi and sandwiches and stuff, and it's all shot from the ant's perspective. But what's great is you never get a shot from a human's perspective. You get some sort of aerial shots, but they're still looking at the ant for the ants, right? So everything's really from the ant's perspective, and these kind of metropolises and weird places, you immediately understand them as a human, that this is just a picnic, but for the ants it's something incredibly special. And then when they get to Insectopia, it's just a bin with a load of shit around it. And of course that's exactly what ants love, and it's a great joke. But again, this came back to, I thought, God, this is so beautifully visually expressed. So you have this kid who's running through the picnic, and he's got gum on the bottom of his shoe, and she gets stuck to it, and he goes chasing after her. And he jumps on the lace, and it swings, and it's done in like what's kind of slow motion. And he's on the one shoe, and the other shoe comes past, and it's a scary shot, like the shoe going round the background.
I thought that was just fantastic, actually, and it really made me think. When I was a child, and I would go into the park, and you'd look at a flower, pollen or something, and you realize there was a whole world inside that pollen, of life. And then you think, well, what about if we are like pollen in some giants, like if we're just a tiny, tiny part of this big universe where you are the pollen, and actually I thought this film visualized that idea incredibly well, kind of, the perspective of the ant versus the human, right? And these enormous towers, or I love it when Woody Allen says, "Oh, look at all that wonderful stuff, but it seems to be protected by a force field, right?"
The plastic coating on the sandwich.
So all of that stuff I thought was brilliant.
And then when they get to Insectopia and they're hanging around the campfire, which is just a smouldering match, you got those like hippie bugs there. And
yes, the bohemians.
Like, and one was like, what if there's a world that's so much bigger than us, and all that, like you just said. And then the one's like, wow, that's really deep, man.
That's me a drawing.
It's great, but and as you say, all of this really, really plays to adults. How much does that play to kids? I don't know if any of it does.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the reason for its relatively sort of limited success compared to the competitor, which I remember being much more, kind of round and colourful and bubbly. Like there's basically almost no colour in this film, interestingly, until you get to Insectopia, when it's there's a land of red and white, I suppose, and then you get to Insectopia and it's kind of grapes on the floor and there's stuff in the sky and there's colour around there, but I guess that's part of it. Like I think the film has a load of charm. But the charm is in recognising the kind of dull world that it's building. Like the idea that these workers have nothing in their lives, really. They just work and they go to the barn, they work and they go to the barn.
And everything is regimented, every hour of their days. Even their dancing is regimented and scheduled and timed. But you also get a sense that none of that changes in the film. That's why I think it's like a faux critique, really. You know, because they're just going to remake the colony, but the colony is going to be exactly the same, right? Like, there's no indication that any of the structures are going to change, right?
Yeah, no. When in the final closing voiceover, Z says, boy meets girl, boy falls for girl, boy restructures entire society. It's like, well, we don't know that yet, like, because that's actually not really what it's about. Well, I mean, the thing is, Z leaves and steals the princess, and then word kind of filters down to the workers, and of course they weren't there, they don't know exactly what happened. So stories get round, and Z becomes this kind of figure for liberation and freedom. Because I really like the way that's done. All these kind of little bits of information are built up in the workers' minds. So Weaver, the Sylvester Stallone character, who's his friend, says, "I know that guy," and then he's a worker, but everyone knows him as this war hero, and we know it's because he was pretending to be a soldier so we could get close to the princess again. But all the workers are going, wait, we don't have to be workers anymore. Like what they take out of what Z's done. Z didn't do anything to be ideological. But that's what they take out of it, this message. So when Z comes back, he's this figure that they've built up, and he has no idea. Yeah, I like the way all that works.
I do. I loved it, in fact. But I also think it's not great. Yeah. That, it would have taken very little to make the film great. Because it's almost like verging on it, right? When you think of, well, what is it about? The message is, well, you can make the same mistakes that you're making now, but it makes a difference that they're your choice, that it's an active choice that you make your mistakes. And you think, like, there's been a revolution, a society has been toppled, there's been betrayal in the palace, and and all this, and that is the conclusion.
Yeah, it's quite pat when it comes down to just learn to think for yourself. Because still the Queen is there and she'll be back in charge of society. And the villain is very, very obvious. The villain is, not Cutter. Cutter's Christopher Walken character. General, I forget his name. Mandible. General Mandible, the Gene Hackman character. Like, he's the villain and he has this plan to kill half the society. So he'll kill the workers, keep the soldiers, and make the society strong and all the rest in his image. But that's the things like that is that's quite simple. Nothing ever works like that. And actually, the idea that the film is kind of conversant with that society is broken and the structure could be a problem isn't something that actually changes.
And there's an interesting thing in that, because actually, that character has certain interesting echoes of any dictator, really, or of any authoritarian regime, which is like a hatred of the weak. Right? And you think, what is it about the weak that bothers people so much? Is it that they might be called upon to help? Yeah? Kind of, what is it that kind of weak, why do weak people inspire such fear? And they're meant to be weak, right? So why are you so afraid of them? Why do they bother you so much?
Well, that's something that ultimately in the film it doesn't receive any attention. That is at the core of some of the film's failings, I suppose. Like, why Mandible wants to do what he's doing is... It just should be obvious to us. It's obvious that he wants to kill the weak, but, actually, who he is underneath all that, not interesting, not developed. And
also, why does he want to kill the weak? Because you think, some other dictator might have said, okay, we'll take all the weak because they're weak. And just put them to work or something. Or
that's what Cutter says. That's what his second in command. That's what Cutter says. These guys, they got the right stuff. Christopher Walken, that was.
Anyway, so I think for me what was most satisfying about it was the jokes, right? And the sophisticated humor. Yeah. And the fact that it had set pieces, that in many ways were meant to delight. Yeah. There's kind of a real attempt at being funny throughout. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a kind of... landing jokes. So I loved all of that. And the fact that the jokes were of quite a sophisticated level, I also enjoyed.
Yeah. And for me, the cinematography and the compositions and the editing...
Oh, yeah, the compositions were fantastic.
I think it's surprisingly beautiful.
Yeah.
More than I remembered it being.
And imaginative. Like, when you have the face of one ant occupying all of the screen... Yeah, with the Woody Allen chanson character walking to... there are very interesting compositions throughout.
Yeah. So I'm glad we watched it.
I'm glad we watched it. So, we highly recommend it. So thank you very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, Google Podcasts. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter. And the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.